All right, I think we're gonna go live. I think we might be live. This is live. Um, Hi. This is still. I feel like I do this every time, and I do it so infrequently that I don't know if I'm doing it right. Welcome everyone to a new episode of Thanks. This is a talk show, obviously. Oh, this is weird. I gotta stop the stream. I gotta start over. No, forget it. We'll just keep going. Um, all right, let's go. Hey everyone, it's Hope here, and we've got a great show. If I can get my words out, it's always hard when you have a full time job and then try to do this on the side, because I feel like your brain is completely fried. But luckily, I am not doing this alone because I have my two wonderful co-hosts with me today, Gwen and Haruko. It's great to see you guys.
Great to see you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, welcome
Yeah.
back. So we last chatted in March, and I feel like so much has happened between now and then. Also next month is Heritage Month already. May is Asian Heritage Month, so we probably have to do that episode really quite soon. But I'm sure you guys are also probably getting a lot of requests for May Heritage Month, like hosting or getting people to pay attention to the community. I don't know. Have you guys gotten a lot of that? I feel like May is like a really busy time for us now, with everybody paying more attention to our community.
Yeah, I think for me, it's really figuring out how to use my platform to kind of amplify at that time. Sometimes I feel like there's so much pressure during this month, but just trying to keep it fun as well.
What about you, Haruko?
Yeah, I've gotten a few requests to do things like features and interviews, but I've actually been thinking a lot recently about what can I do to help, AIPI small businesses, the sorts of, brands that I love working with. So I've been just thinking about maybe I also highlight some products. Maybe I do some sort of art and CG renderings around some of my favorite pantry staples. I mean, I can name a few, just like Lunar Seltzer, Fly by Jing. Like, can I make something interesting for them next month as a way to highlight them as well? So, just some things on my mind right now.
No, I love that. I think during like this month, or especially during the holidays, like Fly by Jing will have a lot of sales, Sanzo, and so I always end up buying a lot in that Christmas time season, and then I like don't pay attention to the expiration dates, so the items end up like expiring, and I'm like, oh, I just waste, and I hate wasting food. It's like a horrible human sin. Just that's something ingrained in me, right, from my parents. So I feel like a lot of guilt about that. Do you guys overbuy like I do, and then what do you do with all of that?
So I think I used to, but now I kind of have a rule for myself. If I don't need it right now, I'm not gonna get it, even if I can imagine how I could use it. And for anything that I have left over, I give away on our local Buy Nothing group. So
Oh,
I'm obsessed
Oh,
with our Buy Nothing group. So any like snacks that the kids aren't interested in anymore, or just like things are that are perfectly new, perfectly fine, but I just never use. It's a great way to find a second home for it for someone who like really, really appreciates and will give it like a second home. So that's how I deal with it, and then I feel less guilty.
wait. So this is like a Facebook group? Is that?
Yeah, and they're very strict about has to be your town. So almost every town has one, and people just post stuff like we've gotten like so many of the kids' toys on there, um, like all sorts of stuff. And people have given away like half-eaten like pie pizza, all sorts of things.
Wait, they give away pizza?
Yeah, like they're like, hey, we had a party, we have two pies left. Anyone want to pick it up right now? And they will pick a person. It's almost like you win something. It's an addiction. I think my husband says it's just like, Gwen, you cannot get more stuff on Buy Nothing Group.
Wait, this
But that's
is.
also how I like clean a lot of things. A lot of swag we get sometimes that is perfectly fine bags, but I just don't use it. People they would love it for all sorts of uses and things like that. So
my
That's what.
mind is blown. Okay, first of all, I haven't been on Facebook in probably 6 or 7 years.
That's probably the only reason why I go to on Facebook, really.
Right? Haruko, do you know about this? I feel like you were nodding. So do
Yes,
you know about these
yes.
groups?
My best friend, Helene, is obsessed with the Buy Nothing group in Chinatown. She gets planter pots, like all sorts of random
And
things,
you can
kitty
ask
litter, kitty
too.
food.
Yeah.
Yeah, things like that. I have like a extra pair of like unworn Reebok sneakers that are half a size too small. I'm planning on putting that on the Buy Nothing group. I'm sure, it will go to a happy family or home or whatever. But I feel you. Like, I don't actually use Facebook anymore, but I only use it to look at things like Buy Nothing and also Facebook Marketplace for things
Yeah.
like furniture. Yeah.
Okay.
Get on it, Hope. Get on it.
No, I know. Like I furniture, I've definitely I have a friend whose mom refurnished her entire house, redesigned her entire house with just Facebook Marketplace items. Um, but I think for me, what's weird now hearing about this is when I was little, we didn't grow up with a lot of money, and so we actually took a lot of furniture and household items from like the curb. And so there's like a deep part of me that has like a lot of shame around that. And so when I first moved to the city and got my own place and bought my own furniture, it was like such a revelation because we never really bought new furniture as a kid. Everything that we had was either from a garage sale or we literally picked it up from like outside of a dumpster, and like a lot of therapy to like get over that, like mentally, and to be able to talk about it without breaking down and crying every 5 seconds. But like now, so here now is like it's just such a no big deal type of thing. I guess that is reflective of just people realizing that, yeah, you're probably buying stuff that you don't need or you don't want anymore, and it's totally okay, just to give it away. And there's almost like not the trash component because this is something that you're offering up very publicly, right? I don't know.
Yeah,
I
and I would say like a lot how I feel about it, and I totally get what you're saying because like my family kind of like went through similar experiences, but I think I see it as like almost like a upcycle,
Mm-hmm.
like especially all these plastic toys and how quickly kids get over them. To either give it a second home, like for me, I would much rather do that than go buy a brand new one. Um, of like almost the same, it's like the same exact thing. So I think I see it as like my carbon footprint
Yeah.
and trying to be more like less wasteful about it. So I think that's how I view it. Yeah.
Haruka, what you were going to say?
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say that I think especially Gen Z upcycling the second life of clothing, they're so much more environmentally conscious than I think we've been in the past that it's cool to shop vintage. It's cool to shop secondhand. It's cool to sort of like look like, you came from the 90s and you have this like kind of, like worn out looking t-shirt and things like that. So I totally understand also where both of you are coming from. Like we were shopping at, I think, Goodwill at one point, and that for me was, really shameful at the time. But I think now for me, it's interesting how things have really changed. Like I really love going to places like Beacon's Closet in Greenpoint. It's all of these sort of like secondhand clothing stores. I get a lot of weird kimonos and statement pieces that way. So I don't know. I fully embraced it. I love Second Cycle and Second Life of clothing.
Yeah, I think it was, at the time, because now it's so common and it's cool, and there's the whole treasure hunt aspect of it that people find really exhilarating, and that adds to the appeal of buying secondhand or looking online for others, it's something that they don't want anymore from their closet, and repurposing it. I think because at the time, like none of my friends were getting their furniture like the way that I was getting them, and like I was
Yeah.
wearing a lot of hand-me-downs. I think that's what makes that
Yeah.
memory, or when I was little, remembering being so different and that experience. And now it's so ubiquitous, it's so accepted, and it's so, again, it's become like a hobby for people. It's become a second job for a lot of people, like Poshmarking their stuff or Poshmarking other people's stuff. So it's just a sign of the times. And, I hate when you remind me that the clothing styles of like the 90s are back, because I remember in middle school, you know, like my teachers would say, "Oh, you guys are wearing bell bottoms?" Like we wore that as a kid, and I was like, "Oh my God!" I'm like, "You're so old. Like 30 years ago, you were wearing this," and like that's literally where we are now. And so it's just, it's, you know how you go through life a little bit, and every time you catch yourself in these moments where you remember where somebody that you remembered being really old in your life telling you that, and then you're saying the same things, you're just like, oh.
I'm old.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
totally.
when you said that, I was like, oh man. Okay, Gwen, you have seen this show, Beef, on Netflix,
Yeah.
and I have not seen it yet. Love Ali Wong, obviously, but you know, I can't. It's hard for me to commit to new shows because it's, you know, you're like, I'm not done with this other show yet. I can't, like, it really is a new relationship that you have to get into with all these characters. So you've seen the entire
I
series.
haven't finished it.
Okay.
I think we are like 6 episodes in, and I was similar. I didn't want to start a new show, and also it just looked so intense. Like I don't know. I know it's supposed to be like comedy or dark, a darker form of comedy, but like watching the trailer just gave me so much anxiety, and I just like, I just didn't know if I was in the mental state to like jump into something like so intense. But we're just like, let's just give it one episode. And after that, I was hooked. I've never seen a plot line like this, like the way it's shot, the plot line. I just haven't watched anything like this. And yeah, I just really enjoy like the storyline. Each character is so relatable in like their own very own way. So I so far 6 episodes in highly recommend it. It's definitely a very unique. I've honestly never watched anything like it.
Wait, 6 out of how many episodes?
I don't know, like 10,
Okay.
maybe 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like I know that there are those revenge like shows and movies out there because this is what it's about. It's like two strangers, they get into some sort of traffic
Yeah.
snafu with one another, and then because of their own life, they go after each other, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And Ali
Yeah.
really is the one that sort of escalates it, right? From
Yeah,
the
they just
trailer,
kind of
that's what
go
it.
back and forth,
Yeah.
and it's really like these two characters come from very different worlds, but they're all going through like just a lot of stress in their own ways in their own life, and that's why the boiling point of them, like this traffic incident, they were just both in such a stressed out state in their lives that like it sparked this back and forth beef or conflict because they just can't let it go, because they have so much stress in their lives. And a lot of the stress, I think it varies. Like, I think there's like flavors of, trying to support your parents, like financially, like there's that aspect of it. And then there's aspects of like, I don't know, just always like smiling through everything, even though people say like, slightly racist things to you at work or like things like that, and just holding that in. So I think all of these very like subtle undertones, I think makes it just like that much more relatable, because like you can totally pinpoint things that you can relate to in your life, going through life. Yeah, the same stressors.
Yeah. I also feel that um, the idea of not being able to let go is so relatable. It's, you know, small things that stay with you, and then it ends up building in your head because you obsess over it. You can't let it go. I don't know how the show will resolve that, but I was thinking about, you know, coming into today, whether both of you have gone through a situation, maybe not similarly, but at least coming to terms with a conflict that you ultimately had to let go, and how you did that. I can name you a lot. I won't. But it, you know, I have a hard time letting go of a lot of things sometimes, and I don't know, you know, for whatever reason that they may be. Um, but I'm wondering if you learned anything, Gwen, from the show, like about how how one could let go, and ultimately like, what it takes, because I think a lot of it just is wrapped up. Like that situation for her in the show represents, you know, a bunch of things. I haven't seen it. Haruko, I don't think you've seen it either.
I haven't either.
Yeah, yeah, but I can imagine there's a bunch of things. But Haruko, have you, if you want to talk about it, because you don't have to, but have you been through a similar situation where, someone rubs you totally wrong and you either let go of the situation right away or it took you some time?
I think so. I mean, I feel like we all go through this in like different scenarios and in different ways and in different levels of severity, I think. I find that sometimes the things that I can't let go of are the things that I'm probably low key just insecure about. So perhaps somebody made some sort of comment that maybe I didn't technically execute something the correct way. I get hung up over whether or not I'm doing something correctly for some reason. I think that's something my parents might have just kind of, drilled into my head for some reason. So it's making me think of a situation a few weeks ago where I was working with someone and they took a look at my CG, my 3D file for something, and they're like, "Oh, I actually know how to do this a better way. I don't think you quite did this correctly." And it just like stuck with me for like a few days where I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm really bad at this. Like, I really must suck at this. And I kind of got to a point after a few days where I was like, you know what? This person just like showed me how to do this better. Why am I having such a difficult time like seeing how positive that is? That's actually making my life a lot better and I'm learning something. So that's what it made me think of. So I do try and reframe a little bit when I find myself in these situations of like, what is this really trying to tell me? Is it worth my time? Is it worth the mental energy drain? And then decide whether or not I need to let it go. And I
Okay,
know that's like, yeah, it's easier said than done sometimes, but
but also I'm wondering, like, who was this person? Is there really a right way to do whatever it was that you were doing? Like, I'm feeling very protective and defensive of you because I know you're super talented and I can't imagine art being done the wrong way unless you literally drew a line in the middle of something and it should, I don't, like, I just can't imagine. So was like, where was this person coming from where they felt like they could instruct you? Was that like really the kind of feedback maybe that they could have delivered in a different way?
I mean, I think they delivered it really well. It was a girl that I work with for some of my projects. She's fantastic. And when it comes to things like CG, there is a technical right and wrong way. I find with CG, it's difficult because as much as I see it as this like creative, artistic practice, it's actually highly technical and you really need to understand computers and how to run the programs. So what she was actually telling me was very helpful for me. I think there's something in me that was just like, oh no, like you should feel shame because you didn't do this correctly. But it's not a productive way of thinking. So it took me a little bit to get over myself, I guess.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, I think as both of you are artists and creative folks, like there must be some level of I guess you have to constantly let go of feedback because art is so subjective. I mean, there is objectively terrible art, which is art that I would show you, which is just not like very not good. But I mean, you guys are both professionals, so when you get feedback like that, like when you and I were working together at CNN, I know that there were times where I'd be like, oh, Gwen, like, could we do it this way? I mean, you must have learned at an early age as artists, both of you, to understand that tastes are different. And so it's okay to hear that someone might not love exactly what you produced, right? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think earlier in my career, I took it really like really it was really hard to take because I always felt like whatever I put forward, it's like the best version that I could create. But what I found that like no matter what kind of feedback, anytime I go back and rework, it ends up better in some way. So I've just kind of learned to like take feedback and then from that feedback you can choose what you implement. Feedback is feedback at the end of the day. So I think that's how I try to, take it and just not immediately react, just receive it and then see what I want to do with it and go about it that way rather than off the bat, like, you're wrong. That's not going to be a good idea and things like that because sometimes most times it ends up better because the feedback made me go back and kind of like rework rethink whatever it is. So it's not easy, I think, like especially art, it's so personal,
Mm-hmm.
to a certain extent. So you're putting that piece of you out there and then getting feedback for it. So I think it's always really difficult balance, but I think that's where, over time and maturity, you kind of learn how to deal with it. But you feel it. You always feel it inside.
Well, that's the thing that I, whenever someone says, "Oh, you don't take it personally," that's the point that I always take a little issue with, because just as you said, art, whether it's art or it's music, and you're composing something or writing, in my case, a lot of times, it is personal because we are putting ourselves out there. So how can you not take it personally? I mean, how I'm asking, how do you actually say to yourself, okay, yes, this is a part of me that's out there, but I'm also not going to take it personally. Like I would love to learn from you guys how you do that.
I think creative and art is a bit of a spiritual practice in some ways. I think many of us fall into what we do as a calling, and it can start as quite a young age. And there's just something that's motivating you to create or do more of whatever this medium or sort of body of work that you're doing. And for me, there's sort of two different camps. There's the commercial work that I do for my clients. Those sorts of work, I think, very similar to what Gwen said. You take the feedback, you consider it, and you think about how you're going to evolve the work. Because I think when it's a commercial paid project, a lot of it is about collaboration and it's about working as a team, and coming up with an idea that is stronger. So that's sort of one thing. But when it comes to these things that are sort of self-driven and these things that I kind of create for myself, I find that a lot of it comes from somewhere very deep in me. It's sort of, there's something that's just telling me to create certain types of projects or certain types of works or subject matters. So when it comes to my personal work, I actually wear blinders a lot of the time because I find that there's a lot of people that have a lot of opinions about what I do, how I do it, and what I should be doing next. But the only person who really understands what I want to be doing next is me.
Right.
So, personal work where I drive my career, I do put a little bit of blinders on, and I will, I will hear opinions, but I won't really take anything seriously, and I will only really listen to my gut and my instinct, and use that as the guide. And if I do take advice or feedback, really, I consider the feedback I get, but I definitely take it from people that I really respect, people whose career I would like to, maybe follow their career, like their journey or their pathway. But I'm very selective in that sense. And I think it's taken me a long time to understand that it's really easy to get distracted by other people's opinions. It has been for me. But what I notice is that when I work on the things that I really want to, that really bring me joy, that really progress me forward and make me feel fulfilled, that makes the world's difference. And I've listened to what other people think I should do, and it's made me really miserable. So I think over the years, I've become more sort of like self trusting when it comes to my own vision.
I like that. And it also then reinforces your work, because and the feedback too. So you trust yourself, you put out something that you're really proud of, somebody else really likes it as well. They book you, or you get booked more gigs, and your work spreads, and then you have an ID for your work and your style. And then you can then narrow those blinders sort of even more as you kind of go forward. And I mean that makes a lot of sense to me. And I love the idea of sort of blinders too, because that really shows that you've got this way of just focusing on whether it's selective feedback from the folks that you want to hear from, or your own gut. Gwen, do you work the same way?
Um, yeah, I would say, like, especially in my more like side with culture tater tots, I've kind of learned that not so much people giving me their opinions, but there's just so much out there. So you're always getting distracted by like, oh, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, or like, like, I should have did that first and things like that. And once you start letting those things drive what you do, you lose a lot of joy in what you do, and you get lost too because you kind of lose that identity of why you're doing it and things like that. So I totally agree on the blinders. If you cannot, if it sways you, then you definitely need to turn on the blinders to stay focused and stay true to yourself. Yeah, but I agree, it's kind of like how I do the personal things is very different than how I do work, because
Mm,
work is a lot about collaboration. And at the end of the day, for me as a product designer, like, work is about empathy and getting, whatever the user needs. So a lot of times it's less about my ego and like things like that, but really finding a better solution for the user.
yeah.
So I do see it's very different in that sense.
That's true. Yeah, you both talked about how the work is different if it's for you or if it's for,
Yeah.
a client. But it also reinforces this idea of why people are, like you, Gwen, you have a full-time job, but you also are striking out on your own to create Culture Tater Tots and this brand online to teach people about what it's like growing up or raising kids, bilingually. But that's why most of us are trying to figure out like I'm obviously doing this because we spend the majority of our life trying to satisfy other people for uh, to have a roof over our heads and food on the table. But then we do lose out on the stuff that feeds us. So I love that a lot. Um, Gwen, I know you wanted to talk about Mother's Day because I forgot that it was coming up. I'm horrible. I'm so bad at holidays and just keeping track of that stuff. But you are a mom now of two. How has
Yeah.
Mother's Day changed for you? Because you obviously have a mother yourself, but now you are a mom. I mean,
Yeah.
you got two kids now. This is your what, fourth Mother's Day as a mother?
Yeah. Yes. Fourth. Yeah. Fourth.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy. Yeah, it's funny because um I think just after becoming a mom, how I view my mom and moms in general have shifted a lot. You kind of have a more of a human lens on them, and understanding like what I went through, how what they went through, and like just developing a deeper like appreciation for them, because I think growing up there's definitely highs and lows, and like definitely periods of time where I was like very anti like my parents everything. But I think becoming, it wasn't honestly until like I became a parent that like I really truly saw them very differently and had a lot more empathy of how they went through. So yeah, so I think Mother's Day is very different now. I have like, it means so much more to me, I guess, like how I feel about it towards my mom, rather than like, oh, Mother's Day, get her flowers, things
Right.
like that. But like a deeper, I think a deeper appreciation and understanding of what it is. But I also think it's funny that like people say, oh, like do brunch for Mother's Day. Honestly, as a mom, I just want to be alone. So that's true. I'm just like, please leave me alone. Like, I just want to be by myself
That's
in
really funny.
silence. Yeah.
So that's what you want for Mother's Day.
That is. Yeah.
Did you tell your husband and did you tell your kids that that's what you wanted?
I definitely will. I think I tell him this. He's always like, what do you want to do? I'm like, I want to do nothing. I
That's
want to sleep in, like be quiet, like silence in the house. Like, so,
some
yeah.
something my mom said to me a while back about birthdays is that on the day of your birth, you should actually be celebrating your mother more because that was a lot of work
Yeah,
for that was a lot of work for her on
totally.
that day. I'm wondering if you both feel the same way at all. Like if you, when your kids are celebrating, turning 1, 2, 3, 4, Gwen, do you feel at all that you kind of want a little attention that day too for bringing them into this
I
world?
think I think the first birthday, yeah, because first birthday, honestly, it's celebrating parents surviving like that year. That first year is really tough, but afterwards, it's like it's different. I think it's kind of shifts because you see them grow so much birthday to birthday, so you really want to celebrate. I think that growth. Um, so I think it kind of shifts a little bit. But first birthday, yeah, it's about like me surviving.
Got it. Got it. Haruko, what about you? What does Mother's Day mean to you? What does it bring up for you?
Mother's Day, I think it can be a bit of a difficult holiday for me at times. I've always had just a really difficult relationship with my mother. And I think a lot of it there, it's not something simple. It's very complicated. I think, my parents came over from Japan. I think coming to a new country, having two kids, raising them was extremely difficult for her. And I think there's probably some elements to just, some intergenerational trauma between things like, having like a stable home for kids and things like that. I grew up, a little bit of a chaotic kind of household. So unfortunately, I'm not on speaking terms with my mother, but I respect her greatly. I know that, coming here, having me was incredibly difficult for her, and she really gave it everything she had. I really do believe my mother did the very, very best that she could for me. But it's a bit of a difficult relationship that I have with her. So during Mother's Day, I like to think back about my mother positively and, kind of like give my thanks for everything she's done for me, all the sacrifices that she's given for me. I really do appreciate it. So I approach Mother's Day that way, because I do want it to be positive, even though the relationship isn't as sort of solid as I hope it could be.
Yeah, I love how articulate you are about such a difficult topic, and I really appreciate you sharing it on this public forum where maybe no one will watch this, but maybe somebody will. Maybe we'll clip it, we'll put it on the internet, and everyone will relate. But yeah, I hear you. I mean, I think, and Gwen, I know your mother also, she immigrated here, right? You were born in the U.S.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was born in China, and so my immigration story is with my family. So I often forget that I'm like Gen Zero or Gen One, depending on how you look at it. Um, and that's something that I've been reflecting on, is like how much progress that I've had to make within my own lifetime of overcoming the intergenerational trauma, Haruko, that you mentioned, like on top of like just like getting a job and being like a normal human being. And so that's something that I've been reflecting on, like in a positive way for myself. But when it comes to the empathy that like Gwen was talking about for her mother and what she was going through, I don't know, Haruko, how you feel about motherhood. I have to tell you, I had this terrible experience with an Uber driver recently. It's always an Uber driver, right? It's always like you're stuck in their car and they strike up this odd conversation with you that you don't want to have. And
It's
you're
probably
like,
part of their job application
right,
requirements.
right. Uber's like, do you know how to have awkward conversations? If so, you can be a driver. And you're like held hostage literally in their car. They know where you're going, they know where you live, like all these things. So I was in Seattle last week, and a driver was taking me from my hotel to the airport, and just I probably my my partner would say that I am too chatty with strangers, but I want to say hi. I don't want to just be transactional. Anyway, so I'm just like saying hi, and then immediately it turns into, oh, do you have a boyfriend? Are you married? Are you engaged? And so I lied. I said I was engaged just to, be like, listen, with nothing, like you never know where it's going, right? So you establish like that you have someone very permanent in your life. And then he just started asking me about kids and, all these kinds of things. And it got into this weird territory where he was basically, as men like to do, like mansplaining me on why men like want to have biological children and don't you want a legacy and X, Y, or Z. Anyway, long story short, I gave him all these like false answers because I just wanted to provoke him too. I said, well, I don't want to have kids. Maybe I want to adopt, but it is bringing up in me this question because I think a lot of us, I mean, I avoid it all the time. But Haruko, I'm wondering like if you've thought about the same thing along your for your own life, because when strangers ask you, it really is like putting you on the spot versus your family when you sort of expect it. And so overall, I think I gave him like 4 stars, and I probably don't think I left a big tip, if anything, because it was so invasive, right?
Yeah.
That this man
Yeah,
just
that's
feels like they
incredibly
can just
invasive.
ask me all these kinds of questions. Anyway, that's my long segue into my question, Haruko.
When it comes to motherhood for me, I've always been a little bit on the fence. I think I have many friends who don't question the fact that they want to be a mother, and I think it's sort of a big part of their identity. I think for me, being an artist and a creative has been the largest part of my identity, and motherhood for me has been, if if it feels right, like instinct, like if I feel like it's right, it will happen. So I'm looking into things like egg freezing. I just saw a few of my girlfriends for brunch on Sunday, and we were talking about how there's these like these fertility clinics in Mexico City where it's a beautiful clinic. You can freeze your eggs or embryos or whatever.
It's like
So
a
I'm actually
spa. It's like a
exploring that.
spa, like egg freezing experience. Like
Yeah,
going
it
through all this
kind
shit.
of.
Right.
But it's also a fraction of the price of, doing IVF and all of that in the
Ah,
States. So that is something I'm considering. I'm 34, so, I should be thinking about this seriously. I don't have a concrete thought, but I like having options. That's really important to me. So I'm considering potentially egg freezing. And my gut tells me that, I'm in my 30s. What I find slightly frustrating for me is like, I feel like I'm in some of the best years of my career, but I need to start thinking about things like, do I want to have kids? Do I want to freeze my eggs? Like, how serious is this for me? Do I want to change the way I'm planning my life currently to make space for this? And for me, that's been really difficult because I just love my career. So personally, I will not be surprised if, I do the egg freezing route. And then at 40, I'm like, I'm ready. And then I'm like, I think I'm ready for kids at like 40 because I'm so tired of my career. Like I've
interesting.
done the roller coaster. So would not surprise me. That's sort of my thoughts on
Okay, no,
motherhood.
but you're doing the preparation, which I think I'm a little bit older, but I never consider it. Well, mostly because I don't really prepare for anything. I like to just, according to Sophia, fly by the seat of my pants. Just like, oh, let's just see what happens when things come up. No, but I love that you're thinking about it, because I think a lot of people, I have friends too who, luckily, their work pays for it, so they, if it's on the table, they'll do it. But I think, what I'm curious about, and Gwen, maybe you can answer this question for me and Haruko too, is like, when you knew you wanted to have a child. Like, I have a friend who I think very distinctly, uh, in her memory, there was a moment where I think she passed by a baby in a stroller, and there was something inside her in that moment that just clicked, and it almost brought her to tears, that made her think that she wanted a child. And I just have never had any feelings like that. So I'm like, well, maybe that means I don't want one. Like, was there so what I'm
Yeah.
asking is, and you have more friends who are mothers too, I'm sure, who you guys have talked about together with this, but does everyone have that moment where they are struck by the realization that motherhood is something they want?
Yeah, I would say, to be honest, like all through college and younger part of my life, I never liked kids.
You don't
And
even
I
like
just
them.
it was just not my thing. Like, I love puppies, I love dogs. I just like did not like kids, and my friends always joke with me about that, like how much I just like don't want to hold a baby, like and things like that. But I think the moment for me, honestly, was when my best friend had her kid, and I saw her as a mom, and how how changed she was, in a sense. Like, I mean, she wasn't like a different person, but at the same time, I see, like, I don't know, just like this relationship and this connection she had with this little baby. And I think the love I felt for the baby in that moment, like that was the first probably baby that I like really, like, oh my gosh, cute, love, so adorable. And I just never felt that before. So I think it wasn't until like my friends start having kids and I start seeing them become moms that I'm like, okay, this is something I wanted, and things like that. So yeah, so I think that was probably the moment. But yeah, my friends always used to joke, like, you never liked babies. And to be honest, even to this day, I probably would say, like, I probably still kind of am like that. I just like my kids, but maybe not all kids.
I hear you. I've heard that
Like,
before.
to be honest, I don't know. Yeah.
I've also heard the
I've,
opposite.
I've kind of noticed, like, I think it's still just like I like my kids, but I'm not great with all kids. I'm like, I'm fun. Like, kids have fun with me, but I don't necessarily like all kids.
See, I have like the opposite feeling, where I actually love kids, but
Uh-huh.
I have a fear that I'm not going to be good with my own kids, because
Mm.
just knowing my own personality, like, I feel like I would probably drive them nuts. And I wouldn't want to do that to more than one person in my life right now who's in the other room listening and probably nodding very vigorously as I'm talking about this. So I relate to it on the opposite end. And then, Haruka, when you were talking earlier about the calling that you have in your life, and art being spiritual, something I think about a lot is, I think all three of us are very lucky to be working in a job that pays us to do something that we innately love to do. And I think also because, we are creators in our own way, that we're giving birth. I think about this, like we're giving birth constantly, like to new ideas, to new, images, products, creations, shows, articles, whatever. And I wonder if that gives us a sense of fulfillment in a maybe not exactly the same way, but close to what somebody might experience as a mother. Actually, Gwen, you could talk about this because you're both a mother and a creator. So, um, does that give you a different? Are the feelings similar in any way? Creating every day, and then also having this role now as a mother.
Um, I would say like my perspective on work has changed a lot since I had kids. I think you realize, I mean, for me, raising kids is like puts things in perspective. Things that I used to be like very picky about at work or like would get me very fired up. Now it kind of puts me in a different perspective where like this is a huge job raising a little person and bringing them up to be a functioning part of society, that like all of this stuff at work just feels a little bit more, I don't want to say less important, but it's just my priorities have
Sure.
shifted without even me consciously thinking about
I guess
it.
I guess work aside, I meant, as an artist, right? Like you love to
Mm,
create, you love to draw. Like Culture Tater
yep,
Tots is another child of yours,
yep.
right? And so I guess I'm asking specifically about the creation of art and the
Mm.
creation of life and raising now two little ones. If there's any similarities, on a spiritual level, on like a calling sort of level.
Um, I think it's still different for me. I think raising the kid, it's almost like more of a two-way street, whereas like when I'm creating a, art or anything like that, it feels like I'm putting so much into it, and
Hmm.
it will reflect that, but it will not like scale beyond that in a sense. So um yeah, I think
It's
it's
not
something different when
reciprocal.
something can take a life of its own. Like
So
the kids will, I can put everything into it, but they will like grow in ways that you don't expect, right? Like you don't have full control over what they become or how they would respond. So I think that in a sense is a little bit fulfilling in a different way. Whereas like art, I have a lot of control over. So, the more I put into it, the more perfect it is, but it's different with kids. So I think it's like different types of feeling achievement in very very different ways, whereas like art, it's like the more I put in, I'm very proud of everything I'm put in and I can see it reflected in the quality of the work, whereas kids, like you have no control like what they're gonna
mm,
be like. You can do your best, but when they do things like beyond what you even expect, I think that's a different type of fulfillment that you're like, whoa, like that's pretty awesome.
but what about the response to your art? I get that there's less interactivity with something that you might be putting out in a one directional channel when you
Yeah,
produce. But you get responses. You don't know what the
yeah.
response might be, and yeah, it is also a part of yourself. And Haruko, I'm obviously curious to get your take too on this, and so I'm wondering if there's you know any aspect to what I just said that makes any sense, but B, in terms of the child too, it's yeah, I get it. It's not exactly the same. But
Yeah, I
yeah.
would say one thing that would be the same is that you realize you're having an impact in someone's life. Like the content I do put out on Culture Tater Tots, like when I get responses of how it impacts people's lives, like that is in itself is like such a return for
Mm.
me. That someone has felt something that I put out there. So I think in that sense, it's very similar because you are having like an impact beyond yourself. I think that's the part that's like fulfilling it in a very similar kind of manner.
What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what when you spoke about kids and how it's not the same as art because I guess I never thought of it that way. I do think that with like my creative work, I do have so much control and it's less about I think guiding. I think I don't know what parenting obviously, but I would think that parenting is a lot about like guiding and structuring, but it's not having this like crazy control over a person or situation all the time. I think, but hope to speak to, you know, birthing creative projects and things like that. I do think the one thing that keeps me from thinking about kids very seriously at the moment is I do feel like all this work that I've created, this whole body of work that I now have, is something that it's like it's been pulled out from somewhere so deep in me. And in many ways, like I look at my work and it feels like I've had like I don't know, obviously not having a kid, but it does feel like this thing that's just like I've created and my soul is in it, and it gives me such an immense amount of fulfillment that I think at the moment I'm very much attached to sort of, you know, that feeling of fulfillment that comes from creation. But I really think that my relationship to that may change over time. I've been sort of, you know, doing this thing with my creative work since I was like 13, so it's been like I don't know, maybe like 20 years or so. But I think that I will get to a point probably in around like 40 where I will feel like, all right, I'm looking for a different sort of sense of fulfillment in my life potentially. And maybe at that time I will be more mature and ready to think about having kids. At the moment, I feel like I can barely take care of myself, so I
Oh,
don't feel like I can take care of someone else.
same. I mean, Gwen, I don't think we
I
ever
still
get
feel that
right. I
way.
was gonna say, Gwen, I don't think it ever gets better at that, right? That we get better at taking care of
Yeah.
ourselves, and then we're always in deficit, and especially mothers, you're like barely taking care of yourself, and you have most likely three people because your partner
Yeah.
probably needs you for things. But yeah, so Haruko, I love this. Yeah, like the thing that you are wanting to create is bursting to get out of your body and your soul and your heart. But it's awesome, honestly, to hear you have such insight into knowing yourself that what you like might change and what you need later might change. I think that's something that I've only recently come to serious terms with, that something that I really wanted in the past isn't something that I want anymore. And that has been a huge, it was a shock to my system when I first recognized the feeling, because, for such a long time, maybe for you guys as well, but definitely for me, I wanted like a certain kind of job, or I envisioned a certain type of thing for me. And when I finally admitted to myself that all of the things that come with the thing that I wanted maybe isn't really what I wanted, it really put me into a state of really existential
Crisis.
observation and
Yeah.
and reflection, because that defines you for so long, and then you're like, oh well, and like, then who am I if I don't have that desire, if I don't want that thing anymore? I don't know if you guys can relate, but there's this kind of peace that comes over that came over me when I finally sort of admitted it to myself, accepted it, and then sort of moved on, which goes back to kind of our first topic with beef, which is like letting things go, and like letting go of something that you've wanted for a really long time, really can set you up, in a different way, which maybe in the future for you, Haruka, was like having kids or something else. But yeah, have you both had that experience where you realized in a very definitive way that something you'd always wanted is really, something that that you don't want anymore?
Let me think. Um, yeah, I think it's less that like I didn't want it anymore, but I can totally understand when you say like you something that defined you
Mm-hmm.
and now either it was taken away, or for me, like from a career standpoint, I've gotten like it's been a little bit bumpy, or like I didn't get that promotion or things like that, and it just eats me up inside. And this is like relatively, I would say like relatively recent, where it just like got me, I was just so upset all the time. It was coming into, the home life and things like that. And that's where I've had all these, conversations with my husband about like, he was just like, that should not define you. You are like so many things. Don't, because this, things like career will like shift all the time, and if you define yourself by that all the time, like completely, um then you'll always be chasing something that is constantly like moving in a not stable way. So I think that's something I'm still learning, about how to like figure out where your kind of like North Star destination is, that is a little bit more stable, like your
Mm-hmm.
journey will shift around, but it's a healthier way of looking at it rather than like, hey, like this next position, because then like if you don't get it, if it's taken away for any sort of reason, you kind of lose your sense of self, and it's really like not a good feeling.
Yeah, I feel like I went through this in the sense of my career when I had a full-time job when I was working at a brand agency. I had kind of zipped up sort of the career ladder, and I was a creative director, and I think that was something when I was in school I was like, yeah, I want to be a creative director, like that's cool and that's like really like splashy or whatever. And then I got up there, and then I really, after working in the agency, really understanding sort of the business of, creative agencies and what being a creative director actually entailed, I didn't love what it was like. So as a creative director rather than a design director or senior designer, they won't, like, the agency wanted to fully take me off of being hands-on and designing for brands anymore, and I was purely doing the management side of the business, managing the creative teams and things like that, which I do like doing, don't get me wrong, but the whole reason why I went to art school and put myself through hell for 4 years was to be a creative. And I just felt like I got to this really high point in my career, and all of a sudden I was like, well, I'm not being creative anymore. Like, what I am, but like not really, because I'm not actually doing the thing that brings me joy, that brought me into this field in the first place. So I felt like I had a bit of like a meltdown after that, because I was like, oh my god, like my boss, the executive creative director, told me that if I want to go farther in my career, this is the path I have to take. I have to be a creative director, and I have to manage projects, and I have to be a pitching machine, and I have to be really charming to these like big companies during presentations and things like that. And I was like, no, this is not what I want to do. And similarly, it was like very peaceful, and I was just like, this isn't it. It's okay. Like, I'll go figure out whatever is next. And I did. And I quit that job like a month later. And now I work independently, and I get to have a little bit of both worlds, where I do manage and direct projects, but I am very much doing the creative most of the time. And I think this is sort of like my happy medium.
I mean, I love that for you too. And we're having this conversation sort of also in my household and with other friends. This idea that once you move up the ladder, you do move further and further away, and this is true for so many jobs, right? Managing is its own full time job, and then you get away from the actual hands on. So going solo, going private, independent is a way that you can really keep focus on your craft, and then doing a little bit of that without having to actually be responsible for other people under you in an organization. And Gwen, I know that's something that you were talking about a little bit earlier. You're in your last job. Did you want to manage, or did you want to also stay creative? Because the other part is that management is what pays ultimately. Like once you get to that level, like CEOs are there managing people, they're managing decisions, they get paid so much. Um, and they're not maybe not doing the core work of whatever the company is doing. So I don't know, Gwen, was that something that you struggled with at all?
Yeah. So I kind of fell into management because when I took over the team for the very first time, I mean, I was a individual contributor, was when both design leaders left at the same time, and they were like, oh yeah, like, come on, you go manage. And I've never managed a person before. And yeah, I think I was similar, where creative director was like, that's where I want to get to. And once I got there, it was similar. It was just like I had to actually force myself to stop doing the day to day, like hands on work, because it was just too much, like managing like entire team, and you are responsible for their growth, like
Yep.
career and personal growth. It's a lot in like the strategy of the team, like whatever. But I've actually found that I loved that even more
Hmm.
in some ways, like designing, being this coach, right? Like being coaching them through how to be a better partner to their team, how to handle difficult situation and how to navigate. I found fulfillment in that a lot. So it was a pleasant surprise, I think, but it does take so much out of you. Like you commit so much of yourself to bettering like other people. So you are experiencing all of their highs and lows too. So I think like management is not for everyone. And I think a lot of designers think like, oh yeah, the only way up is to go into management. But I think management takes a very specific interest and personality for. And if you want to be hands on, then that is not the route to really go down because you will be farther and farther from the work, which can be really difficult for a lot of designers.
I mean, it sounds like you were honestly made for being a mother and made for being a manager and coaching. If that's what you like, I mean, so much of it. I'm
Yeah.
sure there are so many similarities, and we're not the
Yes,
first to kind of come
totally.
to that conclusion of, but between motherhood and being a
Yeah.
manager, which then goes back to the other question of like, oh, well, then maybe people then shouldn't be mothers. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but but it brings up again to mind like that question of, and Haruka, we don't have to talk about it if you don't want to at all, but like sometimes I think about my own like childhood and just knowing that I may likely copy and paste the same types of ways that I just don't know that I want to do that to somebody, and I'm afraid that I might slip into that, and I'm sure there's lots of ways that I can prevent myself, but Gwen, when you talk about it the way that you just did about coaching and guiding, it does raise that same question in my mind of when people know um, that they shouldn't be a mother or they shouldn't be a manager. So I mean, we're no experts on this vodcast to answer this.
And
Maybe we
I would
should,
say like
yeah.
there are all types of moms,
No,
right? Like
yeah,
there's all types of moms. And I also think there's so much more resource now, um, and community and support in that way. And I grew up with like a very, very strict, household and like, my parents didn't have resources on how to like parent in like any other way than the way they were parent, and
right.
sometimes I even find myself doing those things because like it's very hard to model something you've never experienced yourself. So it takes a lot of awareness, but I think that's the only thing that you honestly need is self-awareness because that's where you're able to course correct and catch yourself and like try again, right? And like try to do things differently. You will fall down, you will fall back, you will make mistakes. Like there are times I'm just like I just lose it. I'm like, like stop doing that or whatever, but you catch yourself, right? And I think that's where there's a chance when there's self-awareness. I think when there's no self-awareness, I think that's where it's really tough to break that, generational type of trauma. So I think there's a lot more resources now. There's a lot more people sharing their experiences. And yeah, I think as moms, no one knows what they're doing. Like
Yeah.
there's definitely no handbook you can ever read to prepare you. And you just do the best that you can. And I think self-awareness, just having that alone, you are like far like ahead of everyone.
Gwen, I'm sure you're in a lot of mommy Facebook groups too, because I know other friends of mine, like those are helpful, right? I mean, they really are.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Because you realize how many people go through similar things. And I'm in, mom groups of all sorts. Some are like, modern Asian moms. So, like, there's a lot of similar struggles when you talk about generational trauma. And, like, some people talk about cutting off, like, very toxic family members, like, or just, you know, struggling with certain relationships. I think there's just so much more out there than I'm sure what our parents had. So I think that helps you feel less alone, and you're also able to see how other people deal with it, and you can kind of gauge how you want to deal with certain situations. So those the mommy groups definitely help, and probably also the only reason why I'm still on Facebook is buy nothing and mommy groups.
I like it. I mean, if
That's
if
the
it
only
works,
reason.
if it works, it works, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Haruko, anything you wanted to add before we're coming up to the hour? So I want to uh, switch over to our last segment, but anything else that you wanted to add and share?
Yeah, I mean, I feel you, and you know, like when you kind of are concerned about repeating kind of, I think maybe some of the parenting that you received, and that is something I am so aware of because to even heal and move past a lot of my childhood, I had to go through a ton of therapy. And then you also have to relearn in some ways, like the way you're parented in some ways, I feel like it kind of affects the relationship we have with your partner as well, because you're watching your parents, you know, relationship dynamics. So I had to do a lot of deep work and therapy around that as well. So I think for me, I'm just like very cautious about becoming a parent because I mean, just healing from my childhood was so much work, and then also improving like my own kind of like the way I show up in a relationship and not sort of repeating you know, I think some problematic, I think, dynamics has taken so much work for me to just like work through that. It's, you know, I get where you're coming from. Like I feel like, you know, having a kid is going to bring out a lot of other things that will put me straight back into therapy as well. I feel like I'll just
I
be like
almost think like
perpetually in
for
therapy, you
kids,
know?
you have to like, have a college fund for them and just put a little aside for therapy fund. Like
Yeah.
you will mess them up in some way, one way or another. So just give them a little help
That's
later on
true.
in their life.
No,
Yeah.
I agreed. Like I've thought about that a lot. Like you set up all these funds for your kids, but and that probably is one. And Haruko, to your point about working through these things too, like with your partner, I mean that is exactly what has happened in my own life the last couple of years while I've been in therapy, and that's also like a reflection of, as you exactly said, like the relationship that my parents had or whatever was playing out in many ways. The last thing that he wants to hear is, well, that's just how I was raised, because that does, that does nothing for him in the moment. He's like, okay, but like we're not there anymore, and this is different. But just as you said, it's so easy to slip back into that, and um, I think just lastly on that point of reflecting on everything that you've had to do, the work that you've had to do. I recently wrote in one of my journals just all the things that I've sort of gone through emotionally, like moving, physically, work, whatever, over the last 10, 15 years. And like I was exhausted by the end of the list because it's like I said too, with being born outside of the country, you have to, and as most of us obviously have experienced as Americans with Asian backgrounds, there's so much of that other unlearning that you have to do on top of learning new things. And I'm giving a speech in a couple of weeks to a company that is working on like a Heritage Month event, and this idea of unlearning, and we've talked about it here too on Thanks, is such a key one, I think, for people to remember, because you really it is actual separate and distinct work in addition to learning and growing in a new way. Because if you think about like walls that you've built up, I mean, dismantling those walls is a kind of labor, and it's on top of building new relationships. And so all that to say, like, I've been trying to give myself like a lot of credit for going through all of that, and just to give myself some grace when I feel like I'm being really hard on myself for X, Y, or Z. And this is the segue that I wanted to get into with the last portion of our show, which is this idea of unlearning and something that we're thankful for. So the first sort of ending segment of this that I want to get into is this idea of like what you've unlearned recently this week or in the last month since I've seen you guys. For me, I've been unlearning being just incredibly slow with how I do things. I'm like really really slow. I mean, I really take my time. I feel like there's just endless time. It's like oxygen. When I was little, the best way to kind of demonstrate where my sort of go easy attitude comes from my parents had, some cousins over and friends, and they were like, we're gonna have a contest to see who eats dinner the fastest. And there was maybe like only three of us, and like I was like, of course, the slowest, the last one. So out of three, and I remember this because my parents tell me this all the time about the story. But my reaction was, well, I still got bronze. It's like I just like really didn't care that I wasn't fast, and I've been, wondering why that has been the case. And I think it's just because I'm so particular about the way I want to do things, and I'm so methodical. But I've also realized recently that I am losing a lot of time, and so I could probably be a little bit more efficient. So that is one thing that I am unlearning right now. Haruka or Gwen, who wants to go next with what they've been unlearning recently?
Ooh. I think for me, I've been unlearning feeling like I have to constantly be doing something or I have to constantly be thinking about what's next. This mostly pertains to my career. I'm really trying to unlearn that. I'm really trying to learn how to relax. I'm trying to relearn that I should like go travel and I should not always be like tied to my computer doing creative work. And I think a lot of this comes from my parents. I think I was raised in a household of like, work hard all the time. Like, persistence is key. Like, if it's easy, you might be doing something wrong. Like, I'm really trying to
Right.
sort of unlearn that kind of thinking.
Yeah. If it's easy, you're doing something wrong. Something I totally relate to, and I think why I take like so much extra time in doing a lot of things and being methodical. Gwen, what about you?
I would say something that I'm unlearning recently is being like a perfectionist, which then turns into a barrier. So that applies a lot to my culture tater tots, where, just thinking about what to post and how to post it and everything. I got so in my head that I literally probably didn't post for like a month and a half because I was just having so much anxiety. And then I spoke to someone who's also, creating on the side, and she's just like, let it go, do what makes you happy, just post whatever, like let go of the perfection and let go of like what you think other people are thinking. Like it doesn't matter, and then it just kind of unblocked everything, and it's becoming, back to the joy that it was to me before. So that's something I'm unlearning.
I love that. I know we talked about this last time too, but social media, and you said
Yeah.
that the way that you have found success is just some of the things that you put the least effort into end up doing the
Yes.
best,
No,
which is
yes.
so
Still,
irritating.
yeah, still's true. So true.
And I mean, Haruko, you're great on social too. I mean, we could do a whole hour on just social and my own
Yeah.
thoughts about it. But like, generally speaking, I just think and I've posted about this before, but like, I think that the way that social media has trained all of us to think about content and like showing up, it's not the healthiest way for us to be living our lives, right? Like, I think generally speaking, most of us forget that the incentives are really misaligned. These social media companies are incentivized to get people on their phones for as long as possible, and that really is not in our best interest, our mental health, our way of relating to one another. And so I'm generally, quite frustrated all the time with the way that social media has played a bigger role in just our ability to show up as ourselves. And like, if you don't have evidence of who you are on the internet, it really throws everyone into it throws you into question in everyone else's eyes. Like, well, what are you up to? Like, what is this girl doing? So anyway, that's my whole short spiel,
Yeah.
because yeah, it's a necessary evil in some ways. I think for a lot of us, especially as creators, because you want to create work that people will see, and if you're not sharing it, then no one will see it. Okay, so the last question for you both is what you are both thankful for this week or today or this hour or this minute. Okay, I'll go
I'm
first
trying
while
to
you
think
guys
of
are.
something. Yeah,
You
you go
go,
first.
go.
You
No,
go
go
first.
ahead. Go, go, go.
Oh, I'm just trying to think of something interesting because I feel like when I say what I'm grateful for, it's pretty consistent. I am really grateful for my friends and the community that I have. I have this workout group that we all meet on Monday and we all go take this like crazy dancing class in a warehouse somewhere and then we get dinner after and I'm just so thankful to have this community that keeps me accountable to working out at minimum once a week. And then just like, spending time with my friends. So that is what I'm thankful for.
I don't think that's. I mean, I think that's wonderful, and I don't think it's too simple or any or silly or anything at all. I love that, and I love that you have people to hold you accountable to working out because that's so hard when you
Yeah.
lack the motivation. But when you have people to look forward to seeing on your journey, I think that's awesome. So good for you. What is the workout, by the way, that you all, or is it different every week?
So it's this thing at the Mark Morris Dance Center in Brooklyn, and it's called Dance Church, and it's not religious. It's just like you go to this class, and it's like dark, and they have like disco lights, and the teacher's just like you're basically just like dancing for a full hour, and
You're
it's the best
clubbing.
stress relief that I have actually. Like if I've had a really bad client review, like that class is my like antidote to happiness.
Wow,
So yeah, that's
It sounds
that's.
so
I know. I
fun.
was just gonna say that sounds so fun.
Yeah.
Um, I haven't gone clubbing in like over a decade, so I feel like if
I
I
always say like I wish
me.
there is like a like 5 p.m. clubbing, like where you can like do it, go to dinner, go home. Like this sounds like that's it.
wait,
Yes,
Yeah.
actually.
and also like now that I'm getting older, I have a lot of anxiety and I feel very self conscious because I think like, oh, I gotta have a bachelorette party and like I can't go clubbing now. I'm gonna be like that group of girls. We're gonna be that group of girls who are like a little bit older, like probably the oldest in the club. Like I can't go to like any of the fun places that I never got to go, and to visit when I was young. And so I'm like, man, I think I closed the book on the clubbing days like without even knowing it, like a long, long time ago. Right? I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, turning down the lights is good because you can't see as well. Um, Gwen, do you have something this week that you want to share?
I am thankful for so recently I've been connecting with just like people I've met, have like, a friendship online and we like meet actually in person to chat or on Zoom. So I think connecting in that way has been very nice and just getting to know more people.
Are
So
these the people on your?
oh no, no, no. Actually, no, 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 no. So they do completely separate things. So one's like a music teacher, and the other she posts like women in tech content. So way different fields, but super fun chatting. Yeah.
Are you friends with the folks that you kind of trade with on Facebook on the
I
buy no
don't
buy group
know
or?
them from like I don't know them like I know them through online. I think we have a friendship like online. But it's just certain people you kind of jive with online and certain people you just like any people that you meet, I guess. So certain people you kind of think like they're more relatable to your life and same sense of humor. So yeah, so I would say like some of the people that I interact with more are people I would like get along with
How
or
did you meet
whatever.
them?
Probably we're kind of just in the same wait, which ones?
The music teacher and.
Oh, so the music teacher actually, did a class for Ava's class,
Oh,
and then
okay.
I started following, their account, and then she's doing all sorts of stuff there. And now she's doing YouTube. And the other, actually, she works at CNN, and we actually never talked about this until I left. So this is like very recent,
Oh,
but it's
okay.
just so funny. We never connected on this until much after, but yeah, her content's really cool too.
I love that.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, mine is the silliest of all of the ones this week. It's just as an example of what you could say, and it doesn't matter. I am particularly grateful for protein bars. They're wonderful, efficient modes of calorie consumption vehicles, and I have this one particular brand that I've discovered, and they're basically like Kit Kat bars, and they're so good.
Which one?
Of course, I don't remember off the top of my head. I will post it and send you guys later. Um, but I think they're like designed for kids. Like I like search for, because the ones that are made for kids are healthier. You know, they have like
Healthier,
fewer,
yeah.
right? So I'm not saying I'm going full baby food, right? But you know, there are times where I look at the kids options and see what might be good for me. I mean, my feet are still small enough that I can fit into like a kid size 4, which is great for saving
Oh
money.
my
My
gosh.
first pair of Uggs I bought, they were kid size 4. They were like $100 or $80 versus like
Oh my
the
goodness.
adult size ones, and no one knows the difference. Um, so yes, I'm particularly grateful for protein bars this week, but also for you guys as well. And you know, I will just say too, and hopefully we get to do more of these later. You guys can ask me things. Like I realized that recently, you know, I've been doing like more TV hits for like CNN and you know for other networks that I don't actually have like tons of experience being on the other side when I have to actually answer questions. I'm usually the one asking them, so like I'm in control, and so I get very thrown off sometimes when people ask me questions, and like I need to actually practice that. So that's something that I'm working on. But anyway, just for you guys, in case you guys you know feel like you can't ask me or push back on some ridiculous Uber driver story that I talked about, like you should totally feel free to check me as well.
Okay, well, I mean, not to check you, but I was
Check
also
me.
thinking about this while we were doing the show where I was like, should I ask Hope that, like, I forgot what it was, but I was like, oh, should I ask Hope a question? And I was just like, oh, I'm not sure, but I will now. Now that I know that you're practicing it, like, I will keep that in mind.
Yeah, what did you want to ask me? I'm so curious.
I don't remember. It
Yeah.
was during the motherhood thing, but I don't recall what I wanted to ask you.
Okay. Well, for next time, free full license to just we'll make it more interactive and
We'll have a segment on Let's Check Hope.
oh my god, I'm freaking out.
Hope in the hot seat.
Oh my god, that would be funny. I like that. Yeah, but seriously, it's been so fun with you guys. Thank you for making the time. We are all doing other things in our lives, and so to dedicate an hour of your evening to me is super meaningful. And I might, you know, hit both of you up because you're both like, well, Gwen, you're now so good with Instagram. But like, just clipping this is like a whole thing, and we got to figure out a way to share it.
Oh,
Otherwise, you know, yeah. But I want to because you guys are smart, you're articulate, you have such great insights, and I just really appreciate both of you, and thanks for being on.
Thank
thank
you
you
so
for
much.
having us.
Yeah.
We'll see you next week, guys, or soon, next month, whatever. Bye.
Soon.